Welcome in everyone to On the Beat Live. It's Tuesday, October 17th. You are watching the number one UNC football focused video podcast on Tuesday nights. It's a distinguished honor on the Beat Live. Your crew here, you have myself, producer John, Jeremiah Holloway, Adam Smith, and intern Evan Rogers. Tommy Ashley, the hardest working man at Inside Carolina, is off tonight. He'll be back on Thursday for the Game Plan podcast. But we're here tonight to talk about UNC's win over Miami. UNC moved to 6-0. We're going to recap some press conference action this weekend, also look ahead to the game against Virginia. Adam, I'm going to start with you. We had some exciting press conferences today. I loved hearing from Tom Maginnis, the new punter. What stood out for you from the press conferences that we heard today in the Keenan Football Center?
Am I supposed to be talking about our Aussie punter now? UNC's Aussie punter? Is that, or just everyone? Is that where would you like me to go with this, John?
You start with everyone, but we're going to circle back to that punter because I thought it was a great interview.
I was thinking about you, John, seriously, and I do that from time to time. When I told Evan and Jeremiah that I thought the Bo Atkinson video was going to do numbers. I know you are a numbers guy on the YouTube views. I just had that feeling like it's the first time we had talked to Bo Atkinson since he became a UNC Tar Heel. He's got the flowing mane, the Thor look. He's playing well. I mean, he looks like he's going to be a guy who's going to be a stud for the future. But I was just thinking, I haven't looked at it yet. I haven't looked at the YouTube numbers yet, but I just had a feeling. And in no disrespect to Cedric Gray, Corey Gaynor, or Tom McGinnis, who I don't know what Jeremiah would say, but I thought it was one of the more interesting Tuesdays we've had, and we've had great Tuesdays. You know, we usually get Drake every Tuesday, and he was given the week off, which did not prevent him from lingering around the lobby and heckling Bo Atkinson. He was heckling somebody else. He's just back there yelling half the time. So yeah, I see Sean Crowley's comment. That's right. I got my dad jeans on tonight, Sean. What is we'll have to figure it out what the combined age of the three young bucks versus me is. Yeah, dad jokes and dad jeans. But Tom McGinnis, heck, we asked for him. Like, I mean, why not? You know, this guy has played in his first American football game on Saturday, which was a top 25 matchup. He was talking about seeing 60,000 people. What did he say, Jeremiah? He usually only used to seeing 200 people, I think.
Right. I think it was that. Yeah.
It's a little bit of a difference. And as some people on the message board noted, you know, he dropped a few cuss words in there. I mean, he had the whole Aussie bloke thing going. So I thought it was I would encourage, I know we sound like a broken record. I would encourage our viewers to go check out these videos that we try to do a decent job at with, and the group today was good. I mean, Corey Gaynor is great. I love talking to Corey Gaynor. Cedric Gray, I could talk to that guy every single day and never get tired of it. But it was fun to have Tom McGinnis and Bo Atkinson making their Tuesday player debuts with us, I thought.
Jeremiah, what about for you? What stood out from the interviews both today and yesterday? Because I know we got Coach Brown and the two coordinators yesterday. What stood out from your point of view?
Nah, I agree with Adam. I feel like, you know, just on the today's Tuesday press conference being so interesting, I think like having newcomers in there just makes it so, it gives like an extra freshness to it. I feel like obviously you have one player that was a redshirt last year, another player that played their first game, or even, I mean, obviously Corey Gaynor is, you know, always has good stuff. You know, the times we get to talk to him and Gray as well. But I think for me, one of the things that kind of stood out was how UNC, they've talked about the complacency thing, trying to avoid that because they do understand what happened last year. But I mean, you know, just thinking about UVA, the fact that you're about to play a 1-5 football team. Cedric Gray, honestly, he did acknowledge that, like, yeah, it could be tougher, you know, quote unquote, getting up for that game. He didn't say it's, he didn't say he was having issues with it, but he said he could see how that could be tougher. I mean, even when you look at, and we'll talk about Virginia later, I guess, but even when you look at Virginia on paper, it's like, they're not Syracuse or whatever. But I think everybody kind of, they're communicating that they have a certain perspective on it. And, they're continuing to talk about, how, I mean, I remember Mack yesterday was saying that Sunday meeting they had was one of the most intense meetings they've ever had after a win. I thought that was, pretty interesting, especially when you beat a team like Miami by multiple scores. It could have been more, they were able to kind of score a few more late in the game. But I thought, that kind of stuff stood out to me as well. And even Corey Gaynor brought up, I don't even remember whose question he was on, but he was like, wow, so nobody wants to ask about Virginia or whatever, and so he voluntarily was kind of, talking about Virginia and all that stuff. But yeah, I think that's kind of what stood out to me. I think, as UNC tries to protect its 6-0 record, one of the ways you protect that record is beating teams that you're supposed to. I think, it's just kind of looking at how they're trying to be focused this year, and just kind of the way they're communicating that is what stood out to me.
John, just if I jump in real quick, one of the things we asked today was, and you feel like you know the answer kind of to this before you ask it, but is UNC better equipped this season to sort of deal with the stakes? The stakes are going to keep rising. And I mean, 6-0, you're already there. I mean, you're the top 10 in the polls. So last season was a special season to a degree, obviously with the 9-1 start, the Coastal Championship, they played for the ACC title. That hasn't happened around UNC often. But that was one of the questions we asked today, in addition to all the other fun stuff that we got into with these guys. And Jeremiah slow played it. Jeremiah did not mention that he got to talk to Bo Atkinson today, and he is already a fan favorite with Bo Atkinson's parents, who, when we were making our way to Pittsburgh a couple weeks ago for the UNC Pitt game, we're in the airport, it's early, we're sleepy, and here these people are shouting Jeremiah out. They recognized him, they knew him, and it was Bo Atkinson's parents, mom and dad. So before the plane took off for Pittsburgh, he was already fast friends with, I don't know their names, Mr. and Mrs. Atkinson.
What it was? I think they might have recognized the sound of my voice. That might have been what it was.
I mean, he's got fans. He's got fans in the airport. An interesting note from him today, like his dad played basketball at UConn. His mom played volleyball. I mean, not bad genetics you're working with there. But yeah, to get back to what I was rambling about. Yeah, I mean, we asked that question today about being better equipped, and I personally think that they are. I think they're older, they're more mature. I think they're better than they were last season. I think that's obvious. Now it's going to play out here over these next 6 games, but that was one of the things we mixed in with all the other fun stuff, like Tom McGinnis. How did you learn to put on your shoulder pads, which were an issue for him too?
I'm curious, Evan, from your point of view, same question. Anything that stood out, anything that we've missed so far that was covered this week in the pressers?
Yeah, I think really getting back to Bo Atkinson, the thing that impressed me most about him is all the guys throughout this season that we've talked to, especially the older guys, the Cedric Grays, the Drake Mays, the Corey Gaynors, they say the right things in regarding, we have to take every opponent seriously, one game at a time, taking this journey step by step. But when you listen to Bo and he talks about how he's approaching this UVA game and every game he's played this year as like its own Super Bowl, and how he understands the crazy nature that is college football. And that's coming from a guy, like Adam said, who met with the media for the first time of his college career. So when you hear that from one of the younger guys, that really shows that the message and the maturity of this team is also trickling down to some of the younger guys, which I think is a large reason why the team collectively as a whole seems to be a lot more mature and a lot older and handling the success that they've had at this point a lot better than they have in years past.
Absolutely. The success so far is a 6-0 record, before we look ahead to Virginia this upcoming weekend, I want to do one last segment on the Miami game. I like this segment because it allows us to show off Adam's robust notebook, which I'm sure he has nearby. You don't have the pen and paper with you tonight, Adam? All right, good. That's what I thought. I was worried there for a
Never
second.
far away.
So for the 3 beat writers assembled here, I want you to empty the notebook. Anything that we haven't covered yet from the past weekend's game. Jeremiah, we'll start with you. Maybe what's one thing we missed in the coverage so far from that Miami win?
I think it's very unique that UNC has missed 2 specialty guys for the year. Ryan Coe went out early, and uh, Ben Kiernan is also out at that punter spot. So kind of looking at that, Mack Brown was talking about how the punters are pretty much graded out during those practices every time, like they're always being evaluated. On the depth chart, Cole Maynard had actually been the number 2 punter. So we were honestly kind of thinking, maybe they leaned that way. And, even them kind of watching them warm up, how I thought a lot of Maynard's punts had a lot more airtime on them. And it was clear that Tom McInnes had, the advantage probably when it came to the rugby style of punts. But, Mack was saying that in the evaluation process that McInnes was kind of winning, and I guess the way that they graded. And so they kind of rolled with him. And then Noah Burnett, obviously, who's the guy at kicker last year, he's had to come in. He hasn't missed a kick yet. He's been able to obviously maintain that spot that was, pretty much bestowed upon him after 2 games. But I think that's really unique, a kicker and a punter being out for the year. I'm not sure that Max had a team in which that I meant to get to that at a certain point. But yeah, I think that to me that was just very unique. And then even the fact that you have 2 kickers, 2 separate kickers, one doing the kicks, one doing the kickoffs. I know some teams do that, but that's clearly the position that UNC has itself in. So we'll see how that kind of goes moving forward, and just so far I think it's been fine. I think that maybe some of the punt coverage they'd like to do better on it. I know they had a penalty out there on the punt coverage against Miami, but from a field goal standpoint, it's all worked out well. I know Mack was actually saying he wanted the kickoff coverage as a whole to be better. He said that yesterday. But yeah, I think special teams is probably an underrated aspect of this team so far. I think because we talk a lot about, and this is true for any team, but we talk a lot about the offensive weapons they have and the improvements that the defense has made. But I think when you look at the special teams, I mean, it's been a very interesting ride for them. So I think that's one thing that I took away.
Yeah, I think it speaks to Mack Brown's experience as a head coach. He knows to get his roster in a position where he can carry 3 kickers. They have Coe, Burnett, and then the kickoff specialist, and 3 punters. That's, I think, a little bit unique in terms of roster construction. Mack Brown has seen a lot of things. Maybe this is the first year that he's lost 2 specialists like this, but he knew to be prepared for it with his roster management. Evan, what about you? What stood out from UNC's 41-31 win over Miami before we turn the page?
I think a lot of this year has been made of the fact that it feels like this UNC team can win in different ways. There's games where it's the defense that steps up, it's the rushing game that steps up, it's the passing game that'll prevail. And from the Miami game particularly, it was interesting to look at Pro Football Focus's grades the day after. Drake May received a 58.2 grade for the game. And that's Drake's lowest grade of a game he's ever started in his career. And UNC won a game over a top 25 opponent by 10 points. And it didn't even feel that close, to be honest, about the 10-point margin. There were a couple of garbage, big touchdowns there given up late. So I think it says a lot to this UNC team, that their ability to win in different ways. And last year, if you think about how many games came down to Drake May driving late and bailing out UNC almost in a way, whether it was the Duke game or the Miami game last year on the road, just so many games where it was dependent on the play of Drake May. And 1 year removed from that, it kind of shows the overall progression of the roster as a whole. When you have Drake May, statistically speaking, having his worst graded start of his career, and you still beat a top 25 team by double digits pretty comfortably.
Absolutely. Adam, close us out here.
That is kind of nuts what Evan's talking about. I mean, Carolina was up 3 touchdowns in the second half. with um with like he's saying, like, Drake, I guess that's got to be one of his least accurate games in terms of the completion percentage, because he was setting it on fire with the plus 70%. But would it be mastering the obvious to talk about Tez Walker and Omarion Hampton? I mean, Jeremiah and Evan have to be tired of hearing me talk because I say the same things repeatedly. But Tez Walker is such a just gorgeous athlete to watch move. What would you do if you could run like Tez Walker? I'd be running all over the freaking place, Like, I live in a cul-de-sac back here. I would just be sprinting up, and I mean, my neighbors would see me run all the time. Shout out to my neighbors, by the way. I believe some of them watch the podcast. I mean, god dang, that guy just glides. Like when he hits top speed, has he hit top speed yet? I mean, he looks like he's just we're talking to people around the program today. People around the program show up for the press conferences, and they were mentioning that one of the guys was mentioning that when they're training in the summer and they're running, and like Brian Hess, the strength coach, times these guys, see what speed you top out at. They used to put them up on the there's a scoreboard in the indoor facility. They used to put them up there. I think they've stopped doing that now, but they used to, like, you could see who the fastest was. But you're talking about like guys straining to get to 21 and 22 miles an hour, and Tez is just floating, like I think it's the numbers and the ability and all that, and the fact that he's been able to weather the NCAA storm and come out on top when it didn't seem like he would ever play. But god dang, man, the touchdown ball over the top, the 50-some yarder, where the Miami DB is just running as hard as he can, jumping as high as he can. I mean, he's fully straining. Tez is just cruise control, catches it, skips into the end zone, celebration. Like, it's fun to watch. And Omarion, good God. I mean, what I think it was, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, I think Corey Gaynor said today, Omarion Hampton has become a total man. And that is a man in Corey Gaynor saying that about just a young bull, like, I think I would die. You would have to bury me if I had to stop Omarion Hampton one-on-one in space with him in a head full of steam. I mean, 3 yards shy of 200 for the second time in 6 games this season. I mean, you got some one of the things we wrote was that UNC's best players showed up when they needed them. And man, talk about meeting the moment. I thought those two guys really did. I know it's been covered, but you need your difference makers when you need them to make a difference. And I thought they were.
With the benefit of hindsight here, a few days removed, do you think UNC beats Miami without Tez Walker? I know there's a few variables there. Do you have Kobe Pacer? But do you think UNC can win this game without Tez?
I think it's infinitely more difficult because, I mean, the timing of it too. I mean, we're talking about the specialists. It's wild to think about the fact they're on their backup punter and kicker, and they're going to be trying to compete for a championship or get in that race. But no one will ever confuse Kobe Pacer for Tez Walker in terms of the sheer athleticism, but the guy can produce. So, I mean, from the timing standpoint, man, it couldn't have been any better to get Tez eligible and up to speed. Obviously, you don't want Pacer to get hurt. You don't know that it's going to happen, but that was really beneficial for the Tar Heels there to be able to turn Tez loose with 1 game under his belt.
Yeah. I'm glad you touched on Omarion because that's what I wanted to hit on. I think in all of the madness of the second half and how well UNC played, I think one specific drive in the first half kind of got lost a little bit. It was 14-7 Miami. Miami had just gone on an 11-play, 92-yard drive, and there was a little bit of an air of nervousness in Kenan Stadium. And North Carolina came out with a 9-play, 75-yard drive to tie the game up 14-all. Mack Brown always talks about the middle 10. Quick aside, I thought it was the middle 8. Did we add on 2 minutes? Did anybody else notice that? I thought it might be a little rounding error, so Mack can maybe make the numbers look a little better. Maybe UNC scored a lot of touchdowns between 5 minutes and 4 minutes, but
It could be the middle 12. It just is wherever you want to cut it off.
exactly. But this was a big moment in the game. UNC tied the game up, and they did it by running the football. There was that crazy 4th and 1 where Miami had the penalty on the defensive coach, which was quite crazy. But then UNC came back after that. Omarion Hampton run for 5 yards. Omarion Hampton run for 4 yards. Omarion Hampton run for 2 yards. And that one was the touchdown, I believe. So it just shows that UNC came out and sort of imposed their will on the game by running the football. I think that's one thing that I wanted to highlight before we turn the page to Virginia and put that game in the past. I do want to get some listener questions in. If you're listening live on YouTube, you can post your questions in the chat pod. I like this one from Slagle, one of our most loyal listeners here. Slagle asks, what's been the most surprising part of this season so far? Evan, I'll go to you first for this one. What surprised you after 6 games?
I think it has to be the overall play of the defense, right? I mean, I thought they had the talent to make some strides, and maybe more specifically, Kaimon Rucker. I mean, that guy has been a dude through 6 games. I mean, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but I think he has over 30 quarterback pressures this year, which has got to be near the top in the country. I mean, that is just unreal. If you watch him on the edge, it's incredible because looking at him, he doesn't look like a guy you think would wreak as much havoc as he does just because he's, I guess, a little short maybe for a pass rusher. But, man, he is physical and he is precise with his move and really knows how to leverage his body weight well. So I think just the overall play of the defense through 6 games and just the ability for them, especially in the second half, to really shut things down. I think if you take out that Pittsburgh kickoff return for a touchdown, they've given up 3 touchdowns to Power 5 teams in the second half. And I think they've allowed 17 points in the fourth quarter to Power 5 teams this year. I mean, those are unreal numbers. I think I saw somewhere that was funny that this year they've allowed 17 points in the fourth quarter, and last year they allowed 40 points in the fourth quarter to App State in one game. So I think that really puts into context just the incredible and marked improvements this defense has really made this year.
I cannot disagree. I think that's. I think it's. You guys go ahead, Jeremiah. If you want to tackle it, go for it. I can't. I mean, I think Evan nailed it there.
Man, first of all, shout out to Slagle. We always love seeing Slagle in the chat, as many others. I'm gonna say Tez Walker playing because I was not very certain at a certain point. I remember obviously when Matt came out there on August the 8th. He actually wasn't supposed to talk to us that day. It was supposed to be, who was it? Gene Chizik was supposed to be the guy, our media availability for the day. And obviously Matt gives that news out and it gets closer to the season. No decision had been made after one game. Actually, before the first game, I should say, and he just kind of doesn't play. And then, the decision was made right after that. But then, Tez, ESPN just put out an article. Andrea Adelson actually just put out a very lengthy article. Some of that stuff we knew, but I think she did a good job recounting the events and kind of getting the different perspectives in there, and so, yes, like I said, some of the stuff in there we probably knew, but I thought she did a good job kind of detailing all of that. But anyway, it just kind of makes you think, like, for 2 months, how we were, kind of covering this, obviously media as a whole, but then, here at IC, just trying to see, like, is this something that's realistic? I know some people had conversations about, play him anyway and all this other stuff. So, just that whole saga really all happens just like in a 2-month span. And at the end result, you look up and he has 132 receiving yards against the top 25 team. So interesting. I mean, to be ineligible and then come back and return and be a legitimate factor for this team. I mean, I think that's the most surprising part to me. I really wasn't sure that he'd be able to play. I thought the NCAA had kind of slammed the door on that, but that's what I would say.
And Tez himself said he thought he wasn't going to play.
Yeah.
He had gotten to a point where he had resigned himself to next year. But yeah, I mean, I'll throw one in there too, because I don't know if this is the biggest surprise, but how about the depth? Just although I'm looking at the depth chart, there's just so much depth on this team. Defensively, my God. I mean, Mack's been talking about it forever about getting too deep on the defensive line. They are. I mean, they're three deep in some spots. Defensive end. You know, some of the interior places when you bring a Tamari Fox and a Travis Shaw in for a Kevin Hester, or a Ritzy and a KBJ in for a Miles Murphy. You know, like, I mean, they're still not deep at linebacker, but they got a lot of guys in the secondary too. I mean, we were noting it, being the nerds that we are. You know, they're getting to a point where, you know, Stick Lane is with Geo Biggers and Don Chapman is with Will Hardy, and it's not just Geo Biggers and Don Chapman running around at safety. And you know, that's something that I think that's something to note. And also just the fact that, you know how it is with a football season. You have to go through a spring and a summer, and it feels like there is so much build up to a football season. And through 6 games, knock on wood, as Jim Hawkins would say, it's delivered so far. They're 6-0. You felt like it could have a chance to be a good year, a special season. It has been. We're knocking on the door of a November to remember, maybe. So I would just throw those 2 things in, but I think Evan and Jeremiah nailed it on their answers, definitely.
I'm going to cheat a little bit. When you're the host, you can select questions and then give them to yourself when you want to. So I'm going to take this question from Garrett Chapman. He asks, what player is most improved since last year? I'd say you could throw out a whole bunch of different names, but one I will highlight is Tayon Holloway. He is one of the rotation players in the secondary. As we just talked about, that's a deep cornerback room. Armani Chapman, I thought, has been, really good in the snaps that he's played, but Holloway, I think, has taken a big step forward. I saw this stat today. I found it really interesting. The player with the highest tackle grade on PFF. Now, of course, you have to keep in mind sample size, right? Tayon Holloway has only played 271 snaps compared to someone like Cedric Gray, who's in the 400s. But either way, Tayon Holloway has the highest tackle grade on PFF of anyone on North Carolina's defense. And I think that's particularly important to call out given North Carolina's struggles tackling in the past few seasons. I think this season, every single game, pretty much, you can count on one hand the missed tackles that UNC has had, especially in the secondary. Whereas, if you kind of flash back to that App State game from last year, as we've already referenced, I can picture it in my head now, a few missed tackles in the secondary that led to some big plays. That seemed to be a big problem last season. So I'd highlight Tayon Holloway, someone who's taken a huge step forward. You could throw out Marcus Allen. You could throw out a bunch of names there for most improved, but that's one that I would highlight. I'm going to take a second here. We are approaching 9:30 here on the East Coast, so I'm going to take a second to do our ad read, Johnny T-shirt. Before I do that, though, I have a favor I need from the chat. Everyone in the chat, let us know where you're watching from. I always think this is fun. So type it in. Let us know what city and state you're watching from. While I do that, I'm going to pull up this comment here. We know Tar Heel and GA is watching from Georgia, most likely. He says, place my Johnny T-shirt order today. Getting ready for the Georgia Tech game. Tar Heel and GA, I hope you used your discount code because Inside Carolina subscribers who shop at Johnny T-shirt, they get a discount code 10% off. Johnny T-shirt is our sponsor of On the Beat Live and all of the amazing podcasts that we do at Inside Carolina. So we want to show support to them. Shopping in person. If you're in Chapel Hill this weekend for the UNC Virginia game, make sure to stop by their store. If you're a little farther away, like our friend Tar Heel and GA, make sure to shop at johnnytshirt.com for all of your UNC gear. The temperatures have dipped down into the 50s this week in Chapel Hill, which means for a lot of people, just like myself, it's time to dig out a jacket or two while you're walking the dog or going to work, things like that. Go get a new Carolina jacket at Johnny T-shirt. We appreciate them for supporting the show, and we hope you guys support them as well. We're going to take a quick break. As Tommy always says, let the national guys pay the bills. We'll be back in a second with more On the Beat Live here Tuesday night. All right, we are back. It's producer John, Jeremiah Holloway, Evan Rogers, and Adam Smith here talking about UNC football's 6-0 start. We are going to turn the page a little bit to talk about Virginia. This is a big game for North Carolina, the opportunity to move to 7-0. I'm actually going to start this segment by going to Evan. I think Evan does an amazing job every single week with his opponent previews. So Evan, don't give us all the good stuff, but let us know what you've read up and learned about Virginia thus far this season. Give us a little preview of the Cavaliers.
Yeah, I think the craziest thing that I read when looking at Virginia as a whole is that on Saturday, October 21st, UVA will be looking for its first win over an FBS opponent in 366 days.
Good God.
Their last win over an FBS opponent came on October 20th last year against Georgia Tech. Obviously, second-year head coach Tony Elliott's there. He has won 4 games in 2 years. 2 of them have been over FBS opponents. One was a 2-point win against Old Dominion, and then another one was a 7-point win at Georgia Tech last year. Obviously, a Georgia Tech team that went on to later beat UNC later in the year. Statistically, if you look at this UVA team, I mean, they're 1-5, 0-2 in the conference. They recently just won their first game over William & Mary before having this bye week in between that game and coming to Chapel Hill. They're, in terms of scoring offense and scoring defense, they're bottom in the conference in both of those categories. And I think a really interesting thing with this team, especially, hearing Gene Chizik talk about it, and obviously if you think back to last year about the number of backup quarterbacks that gave UNC troubles, especially late in the season, UVA's played 2 quarterbacks this year, not necessarily by design. Tony Muskett, transfer from Monmouth, came in. He was the presumed starter. He went down with a shoulder injury in Virginia's season opener against Tennessee. So when he was out for 3 games, true freshman Anthony Calandria started. 3-star prospect, flipped over from Middle Tennessee State to UVA. And there were some games I remember watching Calandria actually play NC State. It was a Friday night game, and he made some throws that I thought were pretty impressive for a true freshman. I think his biggest issue was his ability to be turnover prone at sometimes. Through the 3 and I guess a quarter game he has played this year, he's got a 5 to 6 touchdown to interception ratio. So once Muskett came back healthy, he started the last 2 games for UVA. And again, it's kind of just been the same struggle at quarterback. Looking at Muskett's numbers, he's thrown for 573, 5 touchdowns, 2 picks. But I think the biggest thing that sticks out is he's got a 24.6 quarterback rating, which puts him 130th out of 134 eligible FBS quarterbacks. So they've got struggles offensively at the quarterback position. Defensively, they give up a lot on the ground. They allow 177 yards a game on the ground. So it could be another big game for Omarion Hampton. But just as a whole across the board, when you look at this team, yes, it's a rival game. Yes, it's another conference game. But it's point blank just a team that talent-wise and production-wise, UNC far outmatches and outclasses.
Yeah, I think it's important to call out for the viewers at home. This Virginia team ranks 84th in S&P Plus. Comparable team there is App State. UNC had a close game against App State, though, earlier this season. So, you have to keep that in mind. App State is ranked 82nd. Adam, what stands out to you about this Virginia team? And do you think this is a little bit of a trap game for the Tar Heels, or is this one where UNC's talent is just so superior they roll in this one?
I think that God, you set me up nicely there, John. I think Tommy would be proud. When you said trap game, my old mind started triggering. By the way, shout out Ansel Gamble, Mebane NC. That's my guy. We go way back. The big lights of Mebane, Ansel.
I did want to get this in real quick. Shout out to Turner Whitfield from the country of Poland. Yeah, right. Very impressive, Turner. I don't know what time it is over there. I think it's the middle of the night. So shout out.
Draped in the Polish flag. That was a great idea to have where everybody's watching from. I was enjoying scrolling through there. It's quite enjoyable. Yeah. Oh, look at that. Evan getting a shout out. It's got fans in the chat over here. But I would say, I mean, on UVA, yes, it is a trap game in the sense of the definition of a trap game. I do not think it's going to be a trap game that traps Carolina. Now, watch me be wrong about that. But I think by definition it is. I know Georgia Tech's not going to compete for the national title, but I think of these next three games, we got Virginia, Georgia Tech, and Campbell. I think anyone will tell you the one that's the most concerning, I would think, would be Georgia Tech, a place where they're 2-10 UNC is over the last 12 games in Atlanta. Hasn't been a great run down in Atlanta for UNC over the years. UVA does have a playmaker named Malik Washington at wideout. Yeah, I was thinking about when Evan was talking about the backup, the freshman. I mean, the guy was looking like Doug Flutie. Some of those games I saw. Jeremiah and I watched that NC State game before the Friday night before Carolina played Pitt. He's running around just slinging the ball all over the place. Team might make a grab or they might pick it off. He's just putting it up there. But I mean, Malik Washington leads the ACC in receiving yards. So he's been able to be super productive and sort of put himself in the conversation for, I think, the NFL draft, maybe, despite the uncertainties and inconsistencies they've had at quarterback. I mean, I think Tony Muskett is the guy there, but I mean, he's not exactly, he's not exactly Drake May or Jordan Travis or Caleb Williams. So I would highlight Malik Williams as a playmaker that be fun to see Marcus Allen match up with him probably. But I don't know if UNC covers that 23-point spread. They're 23 and a half point favorites, I think. It's a lot. I'm pretty tight with my money anyway. Don't have that much. I don't know if I could put money on Carolina covering that, but I wouldn't be surprised if they won the game going away.
Jeremiah, I want to bring this question in for you. Another one from our friend Slagle. What's the biggest concern with Virginia this week, Jeremiah? When you look at Virginia and UNC, what do you see there? What stands out?
Yeah, first of all, I thought Evan did a great job laying all that stuff out. I thought he was very thorough in that, and I thought Adam made a great point as well. With the whiteout. To me, I think the biggest concern is just the fact that anytime you get a UVA, a Georgia Tech in this case this year, or like when you had App State, those are the games where you look at those teams and it's like, hey, they need this game to feel obviously good about their season. I might excuse App State because they've had some really good seasons, but in the case of certainly a Virginia or even like a Campbell that they're going to play later, it's like, what's the highlight of their season going to be? It would probably be a win against UNC, especially going to Chapel Hill to do so. Think about this though. The last time that, and I know there's been roster and personnel changes, but the last game against UVA was a 3-point game. So it wasn't
they
like
could have lost the game. They could have lost that game.
So
they needed Josh Downs to get nuts, and he did. Anyway, go ahead.
Certainly, yeah, and there's certainly been differences for both teams of improvements and losses and things like that. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's not like there's a history of just routing UVA, So it's not like, I mean, to me, when I look at this game on paper, just the way UNC's played, like, it is what I mean. You're talking about a Virginia team that's averaging 23 points a game. Like Evan said, they're very poor against the rush. They're a lot better against the pass as far as total yardage, but they only have 5 sacks all year. So it's not like they're necessarily fully disrupting a pass game, but they are 5th against passing yards. So to me, that's pretty much what it's going to be. When you look at their conference losses, those state and Boston College games, those were close games, both of them. Anytime you get into conference play and the stakes are raised, you're going to expect more from some of those teams. But I just think, kind of based on the quarterback play and not a very efficient offense, it's just really going to be difficult to me, it's going to be difficult for Virginia to really find any kind of momentum in this game. The main thing that I think would trip UNC up would be turnovers. But again, they've pretty much been winning the turnover battle. I mean, they've had some moments where, Drake might have a 2-interception game, or maybe they put the ball on the ground, but for the most part, they've been able to win the turnover battle, in part because of the defense forcing those turnovers. So I think really the main issue would just be how UVA competes. Like, they can execution, like, it kind of is what it is, but how do they compete? Like, what's the approach that they take in saying, hey, we want to get a signature win? They haven't really even been close to one yet. This is going to be probably the biggest chance, or certainly one of the biggest chances they get. Let me pull up. I got to double check and make sure. They do have Louisville later, and they have Miami and Duke. So, certainly not much easier for them. But yeah, they're going to try to take their biggest swing at North Carolina.
One last interesting point I found when looking at this Virginia defense specifically, like I'd mentioned earlier, they're bottom of the conference in points allowed at 31.8 points a game. I think they've allowed 3 opponents to score over 35 points. James Madison, Maryland, and then Tennessee in the opener. For comparison, UNC's defense last year, which obviously was toward the bottom in a lot of statistical categories, allowed 30.8 points per game. So this UVA defense this year is allowing 1 more point per game than the UNC defense did last year across 14 games rather. So it kind of just shows, I don't know if the level is the right word, but just kind of the deficiencies that UVA has had on that side of the ball. But like Jeremiah and Adam have both mentioned, they have played some close games, specifically against BC and NC State.
And one point I want to make about this Virginia game as well is the opponent may not be the toughest that UNC has faced all year, but the pressure on this North Carolina team is as high as it's ever going to be in this game, and it's only going to get higher as the season goes along. And the reality is that pressure bubble probably isn't going to burst until they drop one game, if they drop one game. I think that's sort of, it's weird to think about, but it really is an elevator. It's a ladder. More and more national attention is going to be placed on this North Carolina team. There's going to be more and more noise about college football playoff, ACC championship, this and that. So, it looks like on paper, oh, this South Carolina game, week 1, that's the most pressure this team will face. Or, oh, this home game against Miami, there's a lot of pressure here. But in reality, each additional game in the season, the pressure is just going to ramp up more and more and more. And I think that regardless of how difficult the opponent is, it'll be interesting to see how UNC handles that pressure as the season goes along. I do want to bring in a new segment here to On the Beat Live. Very exciting. I have prepared 3 statements for our panel here, and they're going to tell me fact or fiction, whether or not this is true or false. So I'll bring up the banner here, and I'm going to go to Jeremiah first. Fact or fiction? Kaimon Rucker is the best pass rusher in the ACC. Tell me fact or fiction, and why.
Yeah, John had me out here doing some research, man. He really had me, trying to break down and evaluate, and I really did. I really did. I am going to go with fact, and this is the thing. I actually have the perspective of eye test, when it comes to Kaimon Rucker, just watching him play. So what I did, I went to Pro Football Focus and tried to look at some of the, more advanced tools. It's a cool tool. I'm not going to lie. It's a pretty cool tool to kind of look at. So the league leader, and I just went ACC, the league leader in sacks in the ACC is Antoine Powell-Ryland. He has 7 sacks. Kaimon Rucker is tied for second at 6.5. Ashton Gillett, I actually do not know how to pronounce his last name, but Ashton Gillett at Louisville has 6.5. And then there's a few others. So let me just kind of break down and kind of how I got to my conclusion. So Kaimon Rucker in 208 pass rush snaps, he had 6.5 sacks, 22 hurries, and a win percentage of 21.8, which was important to me because essentially what a win percentage is, it's the percentage of, I guess, kind of your ability to get past your blocker in a sense. So that's pretty much, that's probably not the most technical little term for it. Matter of fact, I might still have it up here to see exactly how Pro Football Focus defines it. but win percentage is percentage of wins versus blocking on non-penalty pass rush snaps. So on those plays, he is at 21.8. The ACC leader is Kevin Harris at Georgia Tech at 23.6. He has far less pass rush snaps than Kaimon does, but he's at 76. I think that's a good sample size. Antoine Powell Ryland in 161 pass rush snaps. He has 7 sacks, like I mentioned. He actually has a higher grade than Kaimon. I forgot to mention that. Kaimon has a grade of 82.3. Powell has an 83. I mean, that's right there. Powell has 2 quarterback hits, 20 hurries, and a 17.6 win percentage. And then when you look at it, Kaimon Rucker has 3 games in which he has more than 1 sack. Powell has 2 such games, and actually his last game he had 4. So he actually went from 3 the first how many ever games. So he actually had 4 that last game. So that actually shot him up to the top. So otherwise, Kaimon actually would be leading the ACC. And then the last one I'll kind of evaluate as far as breaking it down like that. Ashton from Louisville in 199 pass rush snaps. He has 6.5 sacks, like I mentioned, tied with Kaimon. 3 hits, 25 hurries, which is more than the first 2, but a 17.8 win percentage. As far as multiple sack games, he has. I gave him 1.5 because there's one games where he has 1.5. So I said he has kind of how you want to do that. So I think Kaimon against those guys is probably the best. Kaimon's grade of 82.6. The league leader in the ACC is Ruben Bain Jr. at Miami. He has an 87. He has an 86.7, but he only has 2.5 sacks. Then Samuel Okunlola at Pitt has an 85. He only has 3 sacks, and he has a 12.8 win percentage. So, and also the other thing, I think Kaimon also wins the pound for pound argument because Kaimon's 6'2", listed at 6'2". Everybody else that I named, including Kevin Harris and I forgot. I'm gonna get to him later. But everybody else that I named is actually 6'3" or taller. There's one guy that's interesting, Mason Riger at Louisville. He's only played 3 games, but he has 3 sacks in those 3 games. As a matter of fact, I think it was all of Louisville's last 3 games. He has a grade of 88, which would be the highest had he played more games. He's already up to 4 hurries and a 16.7 win percentage. So he's somebody to kind of look out for. He's gotten back in the lineup, it looks like. But my overall conclusion is that it is fact. I think Kaimon all around, when you look at just the activity that he's been able to have, even the eye test, the visual, seeing him just overcome those bigger guys on those offensive lines, I'm going to go with fact for Kaimon Rucker.
And such an emotional leader of this UNC defense. I loved the image of Rucker, Gray, and Power kind of doing the Power Rangers thing together after a sack against Miami. That was really cool to see. Adam, I'm going to come to you next. Fact or fiction? Mack Brown is the leader in the clubhouse 6 games in for ACC Coach of the Year. What do you think?
Fact. Print the shirts. Yeah, I'm gonna have to say fiction, John.
You got me there, Adam.
I'm not. Yeah, in the first half.
What a move there. You never saw it coming. Much like a Kaimon Rucker off the edge. Yeah, it's interesting. Jeremiah was pointing out that they list him at 6'2". Like, man, he's pretty short.
Yeah,
Kaimon Rucker.
Yeah, I was a little surprised at that.
It's interesting. I'll be interested to see what they list him at when I assume he'll go to the NFL Combine at some point, or you remember when Andre Green was 6'4", the UNC's wideout. Now he's like 6'2". He was 6'4" at one point. He's lost 2 inches. Anyway, I'm way off topic, but when he said that, I was like, dang, they list him at 6'2", because we've stood beside Kaimon Rucker. I'm going to say fiction on Mack Brown, and I'm not going to say it's not because he doesn't deserve it. I mean, he's probably, you know what? I hadn't even thought about this with my answer. I just did it here live on the Beat Live. He could be in the running for National Coach of the Year, honestly. He might have a better chance at National Coach of the Year than ACC Coach
I
of the
agree.
Year. I think right here at this point in the season, on October 16th or 17th or whatever it is, 17th, I guess you would have to say either Mike Elko at Duke or Jeff Brom at Louisville. I would think those would be Mack's biggest competition for Coach of the Year. And you know how these Coach of the Year votes go. I mean, think about basketball, where how many ACC Coach of the Years did Roy Williams and Coach K win once they got to a certain point where, you know, they were Final Four contenders most every year? You know, it just didn't happen, you know? It's a reason you see like a Jeff Capel win an ACC Coach of the Year in basketball. You know, when you're voting on these awards, you're looking for someone who exceeds expectations. So I don't think Dabo Swinney's in the running this year. And I don't think, you know, Dave Clawson at Wake is kind of a media darling in some ways, which is a little weird. Maybe I don't need to say what I'm thinking into the microphone here. I do know Dave Clawson, but anyway, you know, he's kind of a media darling. He's not going to win it this year. I think Wake is 0-3 in the league. So you can cross him off the list. I don't think Dave Doran is either. I'm sure he's a joy to cover this season, as whiny as he can be. But I would say that Mike Elko, Jeff Brom, and Mack Brown would be your top contenders. And, you know, if Louisville falls off a cliff here, even though their schedule is very favorable, you know, I think Mack could have a chance to win. I certainly, if he wins it, I certainly think he would be deserving, because I think he's done a really good coaching job. He is quick to point out that UNC won 3 games and 2 games the 2 seasons before he got there. You know, and Mack caught a lot of flack for these recruiting classes that he brought in, and people have been impatient with them panning out. Well, you know, they're starting to pan out now. Sometimes in football, you know, it's not like basketball. Sometimes you got to wait. And like Bo Atkinson was talking today, you got to develop. And it's a grown man's game. You got to get stronger. You got to get bigger. So I think you're starting to see some of the fruits of the labor with the recruiting and the portal recruiting too. But, you know, maybe, I don't know. When does Carolina play Duke? November 11th. Duke, Carolina, November 11th in Kenan Stadium could be winner is the front runner for ACC Coach of the Year, maybe? I don't know. I think there's a lot to commend Mike Elko for the job he's done at Duke. And I think Brom's Louisville team has beaten teams they've needed to beat. They face planted against Pitt, but I would say those 3 for right now.
I should mention as well, before I get to the last one here for Evan, Fact or Fiction. This segment is sponsored by Congruity. We'll share a little bit more about them after I hear from Evan. Evan, your question, Omarion Hampton, the best running back in the ACC. I gave you the toughest one, the intern hazing effect a little bit there. What do you think? Is Hampton the best running back in the ACC?
Yeah, I'm going to have to go with fact for this one.
Wow.
It's an interesting question, because I was thinking back to the South Carolina game where he had, I think, 37 yards on 16 carries, and it looked like a lot of the talks about him being better with his vision and breaking tackles hadn't really come about. And British Brooks actually shined in that game. He had over 100 yards rushing. But I did some digging in Pro Football Focus, just like Jeremiah. It's a great tool. It's a tool that you can get lost in time with at times.
Let's go with the eye test here, guys. I mean, it's unreal.
No, I know. But
Metric me to death with this stuff. I mean, come on. He's piling it all. He's got an 83.7 grade on second
I'll
and
say
seven.
this. No grades will be thrown out. I think the biggest thing with Omarion that sticks out to me, well, first off, just broadly, he's second in the conference in rushing yards right now. Jawar Jordan at Louisville is the only one above him with 3 more yards on the season. Jordan actually got injured in the Pitt game. So currently Omarion Hampton, regarding in terms of how Jordan's status is, Omarion Hampton's leading the conference in rushing among healthy backs. He's second in the conference in touchdowns with 8 rushing touchdowns this year. And the biggest thing with Hampton is his yards after contact. Against Miami, he had 153 yards after contact against what was the number 1 rushing defense coming into the game. On the season, Omarion Hampton has 446 rushing yards after contact, which is 10th nationally. But a lot of those guys who are above him have actually played 7 games this year already. I played one more game than Hampton.
He leads the ACC in rushing because he leads it in rushing yards per game. He's the rushing leader. So you got that stat there. I mean, he's ahead of everybody in rushing yards per game. He's played one less game.
And what was crazy about the yards after contact is I did some digging, and I wanted to see how his rushing yards after contact compared to a guy named Javonte Williams of 2020. I think everyone remembers that year with him and Michael Carter. I think the Javonte run against Miami where he's hurdling a guy and he's bouncing off defenders. I mean, Javonte was this back that was just good with his balance and was such a powerful runner. So this year to date for Omarion, of his 658 rushing yards, like I said earlier, 446 are after contact, which is 67% of his rushing yards are after contact for Omarion.
It's unbelievable.
In Javonte's season in 2020, of his 1,168 rushing yards, 720 of them were after contact, which was 61%. So Omarion Hampton is 6 percentage points higher than Javonte Williams to date in yards after contact average, which, when you think about it, Javonte Williams was maybe one of, if not the best running backs after contact in the country that season. So I think that's what really sets Omarion Hampton apart from a lot of these other running backs. Another thing that I think is big with him is he's one of 2 running backs with over 100 rushing attempts this year. So he's really cemented himself as this workhorse, every down kind of a back, which I didn't really think anyone suspected coming into the year. I think a lot of people, and I know British Brooks got hurt there, but I think everyone suspected, maybe a 50-50 split, even a 60-40 split in favor of Brooks after that first game, I think would have been kind of plausible for some people. But Hampton's vision's gotten a lot better. His ability to see holes and move in space is a whole lot better. I know Jason Staples did a really good breakdown of that big run he had against Miami, where he kind of squeezed himself through a tight hole. And I think last year that's probably a play where Omarion Hampton's running into the back of a lineman. I think how many times that happened last year where he kind of just was trying to just bust through a hole too quick and just runs into the back of a lineman. So his vision's improved. His pass protection has improved a lot this season. I mean, that is something he has made huge strides in. And I think what really sells it home for me is just his yards after contact. When you're in the conversation with a player like Javonte Williams and you're actually at a higher rate, granted, I know it's a smaller sample size, but through 6 games, I think that's a really impressive mark. And it's not something I thought I'd be saying coming into the season, and it's not something I really thought after the first game, but I would argue that Omarion Hampton is the best running back in the conference right now.
Yeah, especially since Mack Brown talked about last year, he wanted a 2 running back rotation. He kind of harped on that. We need to get to 2 running backs, after they had Elijah Green and Caleb Hood and Hampton running last year. Now this year, he sort of has found one guy, and he's stuck with Hampton, and it's worked, certainly for UNC. I do want to bring up Congruity here because it is a fact. Congruity is the leading provider for Tar Heel businesses' payroll, HR, and employee benefits needs. They are North Carolina based. They empower small and mid-sized business owners with HR and payroll outsourcing. They have top-of-the-line technology that transforms organizations, and they are obsessed with customer service. So we want you to visit congruityhr.com/tarheels to learn more about Congruity. They are a loyal sponsor of Inside Carolina. They sponsor this show and all of our other programming here on our YouTube channel and across our podcast network. So be sure to check them out and show them some love, Congruity HR. Before we get out of here, 10 o'clock on a Tuesday night here on the East Coast. Adam, anything left? Anything we missed tonight from the show?
Shout out Fireman Lamont in the chat. Shout out my guy, Bill Abernathy, who says he's watching from Naperville, Illinois, which happens to be the home of one of my best friends, Dan Wiederer. Bill, I don't know if you know him. I don't know if you read him. He covers the Bears for the Chicago Tribune, but I know Naperville. I got love for Naperville. Appreciate you tuning in with us. I guess the only thing I might have left is what I think is going to happen on Saturday on the CW. I don't know if we have any Gilmore Girls or Gossip Girl jokes. Throw them in the chat if you'd like. I don't know any other CW shows. I don't know. Wasn't there a witches show that had I don't know, a bunch of young white girls that were kind of witches? I can't remember. I can't think of the name.
Did y'all ever watch All American on there?
No, Charmed is the one I'm thinking of. Was that a show of witches? I can't remember.
I think so. Yeah. Was that CW?
I just feel like it was. I don't know. I honestly don't know.
It might have been.
I feel a little bad. We have to make sure we're not leaving Evan out. So, Evan, I know you're a little young. So, this is a television network. You used to go on your TV and plug in numbers on this thing called a remote, and you could find CW Network. I'm sure a lot of people are going to be looking up that channel this weekend.
I was gonna be honest. I don't even know what channel the CW network's on, and I've never seen the channel in my life. The crazy thing about, I think I've watched I saw State and Marshall playing against it on the CW earlier this year.
Oh, was
And
that a CW? That was CW?
Yeah,
game?
and I was disappointed in the score bug. I think I keep telling everyone that when CW gets brought up, it's the exact same score bug used in ESPN games. Like everyone made this big deal about the CW, getting these games for the ACC, and I thought they would go all out with, a one-person creative team is probably all it would take to get a unique score bug. So I guess that's my rant on the CW network. I do not know the channel too, and probably never will. But yeah, UNC is playing football on it. Never thought I'd say that in my life.
That's so interesting. I thought the CW was like a common thing. Even people in the chat are like, "What's the CW?" I thought it was like, yeah, that's crazy. All right.
I mean, I know what it is. I just don't. It's one of those that I don't think I've ever really watched. You know what I mean? Like I just, yeah. I mean, I've got the CW somewhere on my my TV in there.
Local channel, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm just predictable with the things I watch. But.
Shout out Fireman Lamont with the Hulu has live sports.
Yes, he's on a roll.
That's a good one.
I'm gonna say the score for Saturday is going to be UNC 44, UVA 13. That would mean UNC covers. I don't know that they're going to cover, but I got 44-13 Tar Heels.
Nice. Jeremiah and Evan, real quick before we get out of here, quick score prediction from you all.
I'll go UNC. We'll give UNC Adam, what was your score? I don't want to copy you.
You can copy it. I mean, I wouldn't recommend it if you want to be accurate.
All right. I'm gonna go.
I said 44-13 is what I said. I mean, I don't know.
I'm gonna go UNC 38, and I'm gonna go UVA 16. 14.
I'm gonna
14. We'll go
14.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go UNC 45. UVA 10. And Connor Harrell gets his first touchdown of his college career.
Whoa.
Oh, okay.
Spicy.
Hot take.
That's a hot take. I'm not too confident, but it'd be interesting to see.
That's the thing that some of us were talking about today. Do you get? I mean, it sounds ridiculous because it makes you sound like you're sort of spoiled. But I mean, do style points start to matter now in the back half of the regular season? I would guess that winning is the style point you need the most. But yeah, I mean, I guess that starts to be a concern because you got people that don't watch your games determining your fate. Yeah. Possibly for the postseason. I don't know. That's a very small thing to take into consideration, the style points aspect of it.
I had not thought about that, Adam. I think that's a good reflection of the state of the UNC football program. We're now measuring not only are they winning, but how big are they winning, which is a really interesting spot for the program to be. Well, for producer John, myself, for Jeremiah, for Evan, for Adam, thank you all for watching tonight. This has been On the Beat Live. There'll be tons of content leading up to the game. Who is going to be there on the beat on Saturday? Who's covering the game?
We'll all be there.
Dream team, all three.
Awesome. Exciting stuff. So keep an eye out for all three of these guys to be in the press box. Follow them. Be sure to check out InsideCarolina.com for all the other content, UNC football and basketball related. Appreciate everyone watching, and we'll catch you next week.